Imagine this. You're lying in bed at 2 a.m., wide awake, replaying that conversation from earlier today. Did you say the right thing? What did they really mean by that comment? Maybe you should have responded differently. And that email you sent, did it sound too harsh? Too friendly? You check your phone to reread it for the fifth time. Your mind jumps to tomorrow's meeting. What if you forget something important? What if they ask questions you can't answer? You should probably prepare more. You make a mental note to wake up earlier, even though you know you'll be exhausted from another night of broken sleep. Sound familiar? This mental hamster wheel, this constant analysis, replaying and forecasting. It's not just annoying, it's actually reshaping your entire life, and not in the way you think. What if all this mental effort, all this careful thinking and planning and worrying, is actually making your life more complicated rather than better? What if the very thing you believe is helping you, thinking everything through, is actually the main source of your stress, indecision, and unhappiness? We live in a world that celebrates overthinking. We call it being thorough, analytical, or detail-oriented. We're taught that if we just think hard enough, long enough, we can solve any problem, prevent any mistake, and control any outcome. The person who considers every angle is responsible. The person who makes quick decisions is reckless. But this belief has created an epidemic of mental exhaustion. The average person spends nearly 70% of their waking hours lost in thought, most of it repetitive, most of it unproductive, and most of it focused on either regretting the past or worrying about the future. That's nearly 12 hours a day spent overthinking rather than actually living. Look at your own life. How many opportunities have you missed because you were too busy analyzing rather than acting? How many hours of sleep have you lost to thoughts that changed nothing? How many moments of potential joy have slipped by unnoticed because your mind was busy solving problems that didn't exist yet? Overthinking isn't careful planning. It's a trap. It creates problems where none exist. It finds threats in neutral comment. It invents scenarios that never happen. It keeps you stuck in endless loops of thought instead of moving forward in life. The most successful, peaceful, and happy people have discovered a counterintuitive truth. Clarity comes not from more thinking, but from less. The moment you end overthinking, everything in your life starts to simplify. Decisions become clearer. Relationships become more authentic. Work becomes more productive. And most importantly, your mind becomes a place of peace rather than constant chaos. By the end of this journey, you'll understand exactly why and how to break free from overthinking. You'll learn why your brain is wired to overthink and how to recognize when helpful analysis has transformed into harmful rumination. You'll discover practical ways to quiet the mental noise that's been drowning out your intuition and preventing you from seeing the simple solutions right in front of you. And you'll understand why the moment you stop overcomplicating your life with excessive thinking, everything begins to fall naturally into place. Think about this. How much mental energy do you waste every day replaying conversations in your head, imagining all the things you should have said? How often do you put off making a decision because you're caught in an endless loop of what ifs? How many times have you turned a simple text message into a 30-minute analysis of word choice and emoji placement? The cost of overthinking isn't just wasted time. It's your peace of mind, your relationship, and your ability to take action when it matters. Research shows that overthinking activates your brain's stress response, flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline. This doesn't just feel bad. It literally changes how your brain works. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for clear decision-making, becomes less effective the more you overthink. It's like trying to see through foggy glasses. The harder you strain, the less clearly you can see. Studies at Stanford University found that overthinkers are 33% more likely to develop anxiety and depression than people who don't overthink. They're also 28% less likely to take action on important goals and 42% more likely to report feeling stuck in life. This isn't just uncomfortable. It's a hidden trap that keeps you living below your potential. You start learning from them instead. Reflection becomes productive rather than punishing. Neuroscience research shows that brief, solution-focused reflection activates your brain's learning centers, while rumination, going over the same thoughts repeatedly, activates stress pathways that actually impair learning. The most peaceful minds aren't empty. They're clear. They can focus intensely when needed, then let go completely. They can consider options without getting trapped in them. They can face uncertainty without manufacturing false certainty through excessive analysis. This mental clarity isn't something you're born with. It's a skill you can develop by understanding and breaking the psychological patterns of overthinking. Look at the contrast between overthinkers and clear thinkers in everyday life. The overthinker spends an hour crafting the perfect email that no one will remember tomorrow. The clear thinker communicates what's necessary and moves on. The overthinker lies awake, imagining conversation scenarios that will never happen. The clear thinker sleeps soundly, addressing situations as they actually arise. The overthinker gets stuck in analysis paralysis, missing opportunities while seeking more information. The clear thinker takes calculated risks with the information available. This is why ending overthinking creates such freedom. You're not just saving time and mental energy, you're escaping a psychological trap that keeps you caught between past and future, never fully experiencing the present moment where life actually happens. Let's bring this out of theory and into your daily life. How does ending overthinking actually change things in the real world? Imagine waking up tomorrow and approaching your day with a clear, simplified mind, not empty or careless, but uncluttered by excessive thinking. How would that transform your work, your relationship, and your everyday decisions? At work, overthinking creates what productivity experts call task inflation, where simple jobs become complicated through excessive analysis. A 15-minute email becomes a 90-minute ordeal. A basic decision requires 3 meetings. A straightforward project gets buried under layers of unnecessary planning. One study from the Microsoft Workplace Analytics team found that employees spend an average of 5.3 hours per week stuck in overthinking loops, essentially working against themselves. Take Alex, a marketing manager who spent 3 days perfecting a presentation, revising it 14 times, imagining every possible question and objection. His colleague Sam spent 2 hours on her presentation, focusing on the core message and key data. In the meeting, Alex appeared tense and over-rehearsed, while Sam came across as confident and engaging. The feedback showed that Sam's presentation was rated higher for clarity and impact, despite, or rather because of, her simplified approach. The most productive people aren't those who think about work constantly. They're the ones who can focus intensely when working, then completely detach. They don't bring work problems into the shower, to the dinner table, or to bed. Their minds are tools they control, not treadmills that keep running without their permission. In relationships, overthinking creates distance where there should be connection. When you're analyzing your partner's tone of voice, second-guessing your friend's text message, or rehearsing conversations before they happen, you're not actually engaging with the person. You're engaging with your thoughts about them. Research from the Gottman Institute, which has studied thousands of relationships over decades, found that overthinking partners score 37% lower on communication satisfaction. Why? Because they're not truly listening. They're busy formulating their perfect response or analyzing what was just said. They miss facial expressions, tone changes, and emotional cues that are crucial for genuine connection. Jessica used to overthink every interaction with her boyfriend. When he seemed quiet, she'd spiral into hours of analysis about what she might have done wrong. One day, instead of overthinking, she simply asked, "You seem quiet today. Everything okay?" He explained he was worried about a work present, something completely unrelated to her. That simple exchange saved her hours of needless worry and actually brought them closer. With personal goals, overthinking is often disguised as preparation or research. You tell yourself you're getting ready to start that business, write that book, or begin that fitness program. But really, you're stuck in an endless loop of planning that prevents actual doing. Professional coaches call this productive procrastination, feeling busy while avoiding the essential work. When Michael wanted to start running, he spent weeks researching the best shoes, optimal training schedules, and perfect nutrition plans. 6 months later, he still hadn't begun running regularly. His neighbor Kim simply put on comfortable shoes and started with 10 minutes around the block. Within those same 6 months, Kim had completed her first half marathon, while Michael was still overthinking the perfect approach. Even your daily decisions become simpler when you end overthinking. The average adult makes about 35,000 decisions every day. Overthinkers turn routine choices into energy-draining ordeals. Should I wear this or that? Should I send this email now or later? Should I take this route or another? These small decisions shouldn't require significant mental energy. Yet for overthinkers, they become major sources of stress. One practical technique used by former Apple CEO Steve Jobs was to simplify his wardrobe to the same style every day, eliminating one entire category of decision. Former President Obama did something similar. These weren't acts of laziness. They were strategic decisions to preserve mental energy for truly important matters. Ending overthinking doesn't mean you stop caring or stop planning. It means you distinguish between productive thought and unproductive rumination. It means you recognize when additional thinking will improve a situation and when it's just making things more complicated. It means you value clarity over complexity, action over endless analysis, and peace of mind over the illusion of control. There's a strange paradox when it comes to overthinking and relationships. The more you analyze, rehearse, and worry about your interactions with others, the less genuine and satisfying those connections become. When you stop overthinking social interactions, something remarkable happens. Your relationships become more authentic, more enjoyable, and paradoxically, more successful. Think about your most recent conversation that didn't go as planned. Did you leave thinking of all the things you should have said? Did you replay it in your mind, editing and revising as if you could somehow change what already happened? Now think about your most enjoyable social interaction. Were you calculating every word, or were you simply present, responding naturally in the moment? Communication researcher Dr. Brené Brown found that people who overthink social interactions score 41% lower on measures of authentic connection. Why? Because connection happens in real time, not in your head before or after the fact. Overthinking creates a barrier between you and others. You're interacting with your thoughts about the person rather than with the actual person in front of you. This shows up in countless ways. You don't share an honest opinion because you overthink the possible reactions. You don't ask someone out because you've created elaborate rejection scenarios in your mind. You don't speak up in meetings because you're too busy crafting the perfect comment, and by the time you've got it, the conversation has moved on. Sarah used to spend hours analyzing her texts with friends, wondering if she sounded too eager, too distant, or somehow inappropriate. She'd write and rewrite simple messages, sometimes taking screenshots to get opinions from other friends. One day, her phone broke, forcing her to use an old flip phone that made texting difficult. She started calling people instead of texting, and to her surprise, her friendships deepened. The real-time conversation left no room for overthinking. She had to be present and responsive. 6 months later, even with a new smartphone, she still prefers calling when something feels important. Ironically, the people we perceive as socially skilled are rarely overthinkers. They're not mentally rehearsing conversations or analyzing every word. They're fully engaged in the moment. The most charismatic people respond to what's actually happening, not to what they anticipated might happen or what they fear could happen. This extends to deeper relationships. Marriage counselors report that overthinking is present in 68% of relationship conflict. One partner says something simple. The other spends hours analyzing hidden meanings that were never there. And suddenly, a small comment becomes a major issue. The overthinking partner isn't responding to what was actually said. They're responding to their interpretation, their fears, and their past experiences projected onto the present moment. Mark and Lisa were on the verge of divorce after 8 years together. During therapy, they discovered a pattern. Whenever Mark was quiet, often because he was tired from work, Lisa would overthink his silence, creating elaborate stories about his dissatisfaction with their marriage. She'd then respond to these imagined problems, creating real tension. Their breakthrough came when Lisa learned to simply ask, "You're quiet today? Is it about us? Or just life in general?" 9 times out of 10, it had nothing to do with their relationship. This simple question replaced hours of overthinking and prevented countless arguments. In professional settings, overthinking can be equally damaging. LinkedIn surveyed over 2,000 business professionals and found that 74% reported spending more time thinking about difficult workplace conversations than actually having them. The anticipatory stress of these imagined conversations was rated as more unpleasant than the actual conversations themselves. In other words, the overthinking hurt more than the reality. The fear that drives this overthinking is usually that without careful planning, you'll say the wrong thing. But here's the truth. Spontaneous communication is usually more effective than over-rehearsed communication. When you speak naturally, your body language, tone, and words align. When you overthink, there's often a disconnect between your carefully planned words and your natural expressions, creating an impression of inauthenticity that others can sense. Carlos, a team leader at a tech company, used to spend hours preparing for one-on-one meetings with his team members, scripting questions and responses for every possible scenario. Despite this preparation, or rather because of it, these meetings felt stiff and unproductive. When a family emergency forced him to go into several meetings unprepared, he discovered something surprising. The conversations flowed better, his team shared more honest feedback, and the meetings became more productive. Without his mental scripts, he was actually listening instead of waiting to deliver his next planned line. But simplifying your communication doesn't mean becoming emotionally detached or careless with your words. It means trusting yourself to respond appropriately in the moment, based on what's actually happening, rather than what you fear might happen. It means understanding that perfect communication isn't about finding exactly the right words. It's about being present, listening actively, and speaking honestly. At this point, you might be wondering, if ending overthinking is so powerful, why don't more people do it? Why do so many of us remain trapped in mental loops that create stress, delay action, and complicate our lives? The answer is simple but profound: fear. Fear that if we don't analyze every possibility, something will go wrong. Fear that if we don't rehearse every conversation, we'll say the wrong thing. Fear that if we don't worry enough, we're not being responsible. Fear that our initial thoughts and instincts can't be trusted. This fear isn't entirely irrational. Sometimes thinking prevents mistakes. Sometimes planning leads to better outcomes. But somewhere along the way, we crossed a line from helpful thinking into harmful overthinking, and most of us don't know how to get back. Psychologist Dr. Martin Seligman found that the average person has about 60,000 thoughts per day, and 80% of them are negative, and 95% are repetitive from the day before. This means most of us are running the same worried, critical mental programs day after day after day. We're not thinking new thoughts, we're recycling old ones. But here's the truth that can set you free: your mind is a tool, not your master. Thoughts are mental events, not facts. And most importantly, overthinking doesn't prevent problems, it creates them. Tom spent 15 years at a job he disliked because he overthought every possible negative outcome of changing careers. When a corporate restructuring finally forced him out, he reluctantly started the photography business he'd always dreamed of. 3 years later, he told me, "I wasted 15 years overthinking a change that took 15 minutes of courage. All the disasters I imagined never happened, and all the benefits I never imagined changed my life." Ella overthought every aspect of dating after her divorce, creating detailed mental checklists and analyzing every interaction. After 2 years without a second date, she tried a different approach. She decided to simply be present on dates instead of mentally evaluating them against her criteria. Within months, she met someone who didn't match her mental checklist, but connected with her in ways she couldn't have anticipated. They've now been happily married for 5 years. James, a college student with severe test anxiety, would study obsessively, overthinking every possible question and scenario. Despite knowing the material, he'd freeze during exams. When a counselor taught him to study effectively but stopped the mental rehearsal the night before tests, his grades improved by nearly a full letter grade. The knowledge was always there. Overthinking had just been blocking his access to it. These stories highlight a pattern. The moment you stop overthinking, space opens up, solutions appear, opportunities arise, connections deepen. It's not magic. It's what naturally happens when you remove the barriers created by excessive thinking. The philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "Do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear?" This is perfect advice for overthinkers. Your mind is like a glass of muddy water. The more you stir it with thinking, the cloudier it becomes. But when you allow it to be still, the mud naturally settles and clarity emerges on its own. Think about the times in your life when the answer to a problem suddenly came to you. Not when you were intensely focused on it, but when you were in the shower, taking a walk, or waking up in the morning. That's your mind settling, allowing clarity to emerge naturally. Simplicity isn't about dumbing things down. It's about cutting through complexity to find what's essential. As Steve Jobs said, "Simple can be harder than complex." You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. The goal isn't to think less, but to think better, more clearly, more purposefully, and more effectively. So, how do you begin this journey from overthinking to clarity? Start with awareness. Notice when you're caught in a thinking loop. Ask yourself, is this productive thought, or am I just recycling the same worries? Is more thinking needed here, or is it time for a decision or action? Then practice intentional thought stopping. When you catch yourself overthinking, say to yourself, "This isn't helping," and redirect your attention to the present moment, your breath, your surroundings, the task at hand. Like any skill, this gets easier with practice. Commit to decision timeline. Give yourself a reasonable amount of time to consider important choices, then make the decision and move forward. For small decisions, try the 2-minute rule. If it takes less than 2 minutes to decide, decide immediately. Create overthinking-free zones in your life. Times or places where you commit to being fully present without rumination. Maybe it's during meals, time with loved ones, or the hour before bed. These mental breaks often lead to the clarity that overthinking prevents. What could your life look like 6 months from now if you began this practice today? Imagine having hours of mental energy return to you each day. Imagine making decisions confidently rather than agonizing. Imagine relationships where you're fully present instead of caught in your head. Imagine falling asleep easily because your mind is clear rather than racing. This isn't just a pleasant fantasy, it's entirely possible. The path from overthinking to clarity isn't as long or as difficult as you might think. It doesn't require years of meditation or therapy, though both can help. It begins with a simple recognition. The voice in your head that insists more thinking will solve your problems is itself the problem. When you end overthinking, life doesn't become perfect. It becomes clearer. Problems don't disappear. They become simpler to address. Decisions don't become risk-free. They become easier to make. And your mind transforms from a source of stress to a source of wisdom. So, I'll leave you with one question. What's one area of your life that you're currently overcomplicating through overthinking? And what would happen if you simply let it be clear?